This is Tim Campbell from Visceral Decay, Wartoke, and Fairhaven, and you're experiencing Poppitt's Corner.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a brand new special edition of Poppitt's Corner, a one-time episode, at least for this particular year. And of course, I couldn't. The show could not do this without the other main man, Mr. Shannon Fry. Shannon, how you doing, man? Thanks so much for joining, and it should be fun today.
Yeah, looking forward to this one.
So, what I thought we would do this year, because um, it's been such a chaotic year, and the show has really kind of done a lot of interviewing and I don't know, discussions and history lessons and whatnot, and you've been a huge kind of part of all of that stuff this year. And I just wanted to first start off by obviously thanking you, and I'm really glad that we get to do this, as much as we can. So thank you for that. And the other thing too is I wanted to kind of get your um perspective and your I don't know, your views on some of your favorite episodes of the show is done, or what, and obviously what you would like to see, the show do better on and continue to grow and whatnot within the next coming years. So, um, if you don't mind, getting started on this, is I'm just kind of curious, what were some of the fun episodes that you particularly enjoyed doing on this particular show so far?
I thought our back and forth of the top 10 Avenger and Madras songs, I thought that was quite fun. Um, those are probably one of the top. I think the one that we did with Angelo about the heretic songs was awesome, and I
Yeah,
thought,
that was a fun one.
yeah, and I really liked the one we did with Sean and Brian. That was also really good. The Desert Island albums from the Heretic guys. That was really cool. Such a vast variety there. And as far as interviews that you've done, I don't want to get too far ahead if I am, but as far as interviews you've done, I think the Exhumed was really cool, and the one with Jason Thomas, Corpsey of Gravehill and Stygian Crown was very cool. Those were two of my favorite interviews so far this year that you've done, but those are my favorite episodes that we've shared in as well.
Right, right, right. I see, and going off of this point too, I think I think one of my top favorites, just because I love the history stuff. So I love like when the show was doing like the history of Thrash Unlimited. I just really found that whole, that whole thing kind of fascinating to me. Because maybe because I was there, so I have a different perspective on that kind of stuff, and it means a little bit more to me, say, than maybe most people, which is fine. That's why I have the show, because that's the whole point of it, right? But the other thing that I really enjoyed, and I never got to go there, so it was really fascinating to hear your side and Mike's side of Wild Rags Records, just because I was like fascinated with the whole. There's so many controversy around it, but then there's also so many good times around it. So it's just like you're on one side of the fence or the other. So it's just nice to hear your guys' take on Wild Rags Records. And that was one of my particular favorites this year. So I'm not sure how you felt about that specific one either, but I just love those history lessons that we were doing on the show, and we'll continue to do in due time.
So on to those two that you just mentioned. I just want to say something about each of those. So the Wild Rags interview thing, the perspective of Wild Rags, I think that could use a part two. That one, it was damn good. Yeah, and as far as the Thrash Unlimited, well, that was amazing too. And I still feel bad that I couldn't get involved in that one. But it's so intuitive on how that went down, and listening to that guy. I don't remember his name off the hand, but he was so insightful in the way he talked about things was really like eye opening. But that was also another, like, I totally forgot that one. So that was another favorite. Totally, totally cool.
Yeah, I just like the whole, and obviously that's Chris from Incinerator is the gentleman you're talking about. And yeah, I forgot that you were actually going to be a part of it. 'Cause, because I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah, sometimes we've just the show's just done so many episodes. I think I counted 50, 50 or 55 we've done this year. So that's a show a week, pretty much, even a couple times a week, right? So
right.
it's we don't just do this like once in a while. It's like we try to do it every week and have some fun with it, and it also
Yeah,
keeps our name relevant as well, um, mine and yours included. But I just think that for that particular episode, Chris just had so much knowledge, and you're right on that particular subject that there was stuff that I had no idea. You know, I didn't know how it all worked, so it was just nice to get. It's almost like a pro's perspective of those specific topics. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Very incisive.
And the other one that I really enjoyed, there's a lot. I had to kind of go back and I'm like, oh man, I forgot that one came out this year, or you know, but I really enjoyed talking to Mike. I always enjoy talking to Mike Abominator, and when we did episode 100, I still will go back and listen to that one and just really enjoy his take on all sorts of different topics as far as not everybody's meant to kind of do these things, or some people are just kind of meant to play in the band and this, that, and the other, and I'm like, he's right, obviously, but it was just nice to hear that kind of perspective. And then obviously we talked and paid tribute to a couple fallen members of our community and whatnot, with Adrian Mejia and Greg and Wes from Blaspherian, and Greg is obviously in Sacrificer. And then obviously we did, not on this particular program, but I got to give a shout out to Miss Angie Gabriel. I'm so bummed, obviously, that we've lost so many people in our community. So it's nice to have kind of been there to pay tribute to those kind of people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I'm kind of blanking on this. Is I don't exactly remember how you came on the show.
I don't remember either.
It just says it's always been there, so it's like, you know what I mean? But I will go back and listen to the first time that we did the episode in the hotel room in Vegas,
Yeah,
of all places, for back in before the pandemic started. So I think it was January of 2020, and hearing how you kind of articulate yourself then compared to now is just a whole 180. It
yeah,
really
right.
it really is, because I
Yeah,
know you weren't as comfortable doing these sort of interviews and whatnot, but it's almost kind of refreshing to kind of go back and be like, oh man, I was like that, because there's a couple where I'll go back and listen. I'm like, man, I'm not that guy anymore.
right, right. Rigid. They're less rigid now than before. Yeah. But yeah, man, back to the episodes with Mike. Anything that he is on is awesome because he's he's got a way of expressing, but he's so funny. Doesn't matter what he says. I mean, he has a serious side, and when he's serious, but most of the time, man, he's just that no, I don't give a fuck attitude, and just funny,
It,
such a
it's al-
good guy.
it's almost like Don Rickles. It's almost like the
It
Don Rickles
is.
of the underground metal scene. It's Mike
Yeah,
Abominator,
yeah, it is.
I think that's a perfect way to sum that one up. But I always just found his way of, and your way of articulating, your questions and whatnot is completely different from from how I articulate. Obviously, I try not to be as hesitant with picking my words. It's just how I am, and I just hope people enjoy that specific element to what we do here on the show, and something different than other podcasts out there, So with that
Yeah.
in mind and stuff, you know, how would you kind of like to see the show evolve more so? I mean, do you like when the show does more 3-4 hour interviews, or do you like the 30-minute ones or the hour-long ones, or the super in-depth ones that, like, what did the wallpaper look like when you were recording type ones, or
Now,
I
I
Mhm.
like those kind when they're more in depth and you get down to every nitty gritty, like how deep was a breath when you fucked up this time as opposed to this time because everybody messes up. So how was that? How was it to succeed? Like when those 3 hour interviews to me are more exciting to listen to because you're getting to hear precisely what's going on. I like preciseness. The 20-minute interviews are bullshit to me. I never liked them. Half an hour, it's like, okay, well, this, you're not really asking the questions that really need to be asked. The
Well,
ones that are longer, the more in depth ones, those are the ones I love, man, because it doesn't matter how long it is. I just listened to a 4.5 hour interview with Steve on another podcast, Steve DiGiorgio, I'm sorry, on another podcast that was just like it didn't bore me. I mean, there was lulls in the podcast, but as they went, it progressed, and that happens in every podcast that's like that. But those don't bother me. You know what I mean? Because the podcasts that are interviews that are that long eventually catch back on, and they can continue more in that in-depth discussion. Those are what I like a lot.
Well, a lot of the guests, just so you're aware, I'm going to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit, is a lot of guests can't do like a 2, 3, 4 hour interview because of PR stuff, or they have other interviews. Some do like 8 interviews in a fucking day, so it's hard to,
Yeah, but those are
it's
the
hard.
ones that are okay. Sorry to cut you off, but those are the ones that are interviewing because those are uh, they're doing their own promotion for their album or their promotion for their whatever it is. They have a DVD coming out where they whether or not whatever they're doing 20-minute interviews because that's what they're allotted. You know what I mean? Where the interviews you do, most of them, except for the few that you've done already, have been those extensive interviews. That's just what catches me. I'm not saying it catches that for everybody. I know people have a hard time listening to an hour and a half long interview. They have other things going on, but when you have no life, hey, it's
I think
all the more cool. You know, it's like reading a book to me. It's just in an audio interview. It's that book and that book ain't gonna let all this stuff out. You know what I mean? They'll forget things. There's certain things they remember now than they would when they go to write their book if they write a book. But I
oh,
love that. You know what I mean? I view it in that kind of that context.
that's interesting because I'll do an hour-long interview, and I think hour-long interviews are actually really perfect because I can get nitty-gritty, especially if they only have 1 or 2 albums, you know what I mean? I can spend a
Yeah.
little bit, longer on each piece and whatnot, and especially the demos, and I always find the fascinating stuff, though, is the beginning, is when they start the band, and I know the show is not meant for everybody, and it's not supposed to be. It's meant for I don't know, an audience of one, as I call it. It's meant for the people that can lock onto what a musician goes through, or a producer, or an artist goes through in general, and get into the mind of that said artist, and it's almost I've kind of found like a correlation in just doing 100, and I think I'm up to like 150 episodes so far of doing this, is is we're all connected in some weird way. It might not be, we might not all start with the same band, but we all got to the same place and picking up an instrument and recording and doing all sorts of fun things like touring and whatever else. So it's just really fascinating to hear the beginnings of certain bands because, like when I interviewed a couple of years back, I interviewed Rick from Fueled by Fire, and I went back to listen to that. It's like a 4.5 hour interview.
Mhm.
I was glued to it for like hours. It
Right.
was just so fascinating. And I'm like, man, it's like I'm listening to a different person interview Rick
Yeah.
because I'm not that guy anymore. I don't
Uh,
articulate myself in that fashion anymore.
right. But that interview alone was one of the best interviews that you have done, period. Even though you feel it drags on, it really doesn't. I mean, you split it up into sections and as a listener, you split it up into sections and it's like, man, oh yeah, hey, I'm gonna go back to that. That was awesome. After an hour and a half, hey, I'm gonna go back to that. That was awesome. You know, because that was what he was saying in that interview, even though that was a long time ago. But what he was saying in that interview was exactly what I like listening to. The very beginning. Well, the first time you heard music, that's one of your questions. You know what I mean? Like I've never heard other people ask that specific question. And then to go on from the first time they remember hearing music, going through it all, and the first time they picked up an instrument and why they picked that instrument and how they ended up with the instrument they're on because everyone changes. Um,
But do you think though that everybody's instrument fits their personality now that you've kind of heard them? Because I've always kind
Kinda,
of
yeah.
felt like that. Like with you, you're a drummer. It totally fits your personality.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, with me, I'm a singer guitar player. It kind of fits my personality almost because I'm all eccentric
Yeah.
and just I don't
You're in
know.
the front. You're in the front. I'm in the back. Back
And
here.
there's nothing wrong with either or. I always felt
Right.
like we were the same. Just because you play, the drummer, in my opinion, is always the most fascinating to interview, because
Uh,
their mind works so differently.
yeah.
It's not the lead singer, although I have interviewed a couple bucket list singers, and I just got done with one yesterday, which is going to be posted obviously in the following year, but still, I still got it done in this year, so I can talk about it. But I interviewed Tim Campbell from Visceral Decay. They were a band in the Orange County scene back in the day, and it's one of those interviews that it's only going to mean a lot to me, so that's why I did it. I don't really care if you guys don't have never heard the band or don't even care about it. It doesn't matter because I did that for me. So that's also one kind of aspect to the show is I like to interview the bands that I've always cared about and loved as either as a teenager or nowadays. So like case in point with Avenger of Blood, like I was really I wouldn't use the word shocked. I would use like a bit taken back when you had hit me up saying that you had found the show and had loved it because it's like, I'm still at the end of the day, I'm still a fan. And I
Mhm.
don't think that you can have a show like this and not be a fan of the music.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so with that in mind, and you became a fan of the show and whatnot, and then found out all about these other bands that nobody had ever heard about. So do you think having a show like this is important to music in general, or is it just a show where it's only meant to kind of push the bigger name bands? Like is it more important to the underground or more important just to metal in general as well?
I think it's important in every angle, every single angle, because without you interviewing these bands that are in the more underground scene, then nobody else is going to hear them. Nobody else is going to know who they are, let alone the people that they do have as fans are going to love to hear what those members of that particular band have to say. You know what I mean? Like, excuse me. let's go back to the Rick by Field by Fire interview, for example. Okay, to a lot of people, especially that early 2000s thrash generation, they all love Fueled by Fire. You know what I mean? So those fans, I mean, Fueled by Fire was a fairly decent sized band. So when those fans get to hear what Rick did or what Carlos did in Fueled by Fire, oh my God, that's everything they wanted to know that they were never a chance to ask. Okay. Then you have the people who'd not heard of them and to listen to the newer generation beyond that. Okay. Now they're going back and trying to find these bands and listening to those. Then they become fans, and then their friends become fans because each friend tells a friend and each friend tells another friend, right? And that spreads. The people who were there before, who never really heard them but knew the name, okay, amplified their interest to be able to listen and dig in. And if they like that interview or whatever, hey, that's a more positive. So to me, in every angle, it matters. I think all those bands should be interviewed. Sure, I may not know half of some of the bands you interview, but I still listen. They
Now, why
deserve
is
that
that?
same chance.
Sure. Now, no, not to cut you off, but why do you continue to listen to these bands that you kind of had never heard of? Do you lock on to the types of question that the show offers, or do you lock onto their specific personality, or is it because
Yeah,
I always felt like the guest is the most important part to the show itself. It's not the host. I'm
right.
just the vehicle.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And I'm not saying I'm not important at all by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying the most important aspect to me is the guest. And it's
Right.
all about treating the guest with respect. And yeah, I ask a lot of tough questions,
Uh
but I
huh.
ask it in a way that's not it's not invasive, and I don't have a set agenda with it,
Hmm.
right? I'm just asking tough questions because it's like I've always wanted to know that as a fan, going back to the whole fan thing.
Right.
Um, Now the other question I have, going back to, and you mentioned Fuel by Fire, they were, I think they were a fairly big band back in, to the underground scene in like 2006 to 2009, 10 era.
Hmm.
Why don't these bands ever get interviewed today? Because they're still releasing new stuff. I interviewed Carlos from Romantic Ritual, and I haven't seen a heck of a lot of interviews with them lately, and it's like, is that just not a big deal to people anymore? It's only when it's happening, and that's when people care. People just stop caring about these said bands or moved on or
Well, what Manic Ritual is a prime example, and probably the same as I can use for Avenger of Blood. I never even knew Manic Ritual was still even a band. They hadn't put out anything in I don't know how long. And if they have, I never heard of it because the industry has changed so much. You're not able to buy that Metal Maniacs magazine anymore. You're not able to, there's no Thrash Unlimited anymore to know when these, I mean, you're having to rely on a Facebook page. Well, what you see on a page disappears in 10 seconds. It's gone forever. I thought I just seen something about so and so band from that era. You never know. So the way that bands promote nowadays and advertise, if they do, I have no idea what they're doing because I don't even know what how things work. Honestly, it's just everything is so different and it's instant. And if you don't catch it right now, you're never gonna know. So to me, it was a little harder. Like Field by Fire, they were gone for a while, and Carlos had Blade Killer and the other guys moved on and had different side projects and they took a break until now when they released this EP, this through Salem Rose. um I don't know.
I feel that's another important aspect to Poppitt's Corner in general, and I'm not saying the show is the only one that does this. I'm hoping there will be more and more that do this, but I'm only discussing everything internally with Poppitt's Corner right now. So,
Yeah.
with this in mind, I feel like that is an even bigger reason to keep supporting the show itself. Now, obviously, and if people ever, I don't want to whore myself out too, but I always try to give out beer koozies and T-shirts to the guests that were on the show and whatnot. And I feel it's super important to have that vehicle, man. We need it. We need to have other vehicles rather than just kind of putting out music. We need to still have a collective group. You need to have video people and radio people and podcasting and musicians, and it's going to take all of us to make this scene kind of grow. And you saw that happen with the 2000s new wave of thrash metal scene. Thrash Unlimited is a perfect example. Imagine if we didn't have that. I wouldn't have found out about half the fucking bands without Thrash Unlimited, because there was a one-stop hub for all these things,
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe Poppitt's Corner can go that direction. I don't know.
Maybe it already has. I don't know. It may. I'm not trying to. There's no egos here. I don't know. I just kind of continue to do the show and just keep showing up, man. It's all it takes is just to keep showing up and having fun. And I also think too, we can get creative with the topics and whatnot, because I haven't seen anybody do a fucking history lesson on Wild Rags Records, and that was a prominent store back in underground metal in general.
Yeah, legendary. Yeah,
and it's like, why isn't it getting talked about? So I always felt that I gave that same platform to all the bands that I just look up to: Avenger of Blood, Fuel by Fire, Warbringer, Dread from New Mexico. That was one of my favorite ones. Interviewing AD, him coming down and from New Mexico Colorado, visiting friends and family and whatnot, and he wanted to be on the show because he was like you. He had found out about the show and what I was doing, and was just a big fan of what the show was doing. And especially, and I'm not going to lie, a lot of people find out about it, with Madross and whatnot. So it's kept everything, still relevant, right? And it's done the same, in my opinion, for Avenger, which is awesome. And I'm not tooting my own horn at all. I'm just saying that it's going to take that to keep us relevant in a time when everything, like you said, so instantaneous. You need to have a hub.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, what have you kind of learned mostly when doing interviews? Because now that you've done a couple interviews and discussions and whatnot, what have you learned the most from it?
I don't know, man. I don't really know. That's kind of hard. That's a hard question. I don't know. I don't know what I learned, man.
Well, can I branch off of this and
Yeah.
You can correct me if I'm wrong here?
Sure.
I want to say that it's helped you, and I've mentioned it earlier. It's almost helped you articulate better than what you had originally done even before this, right? So it's like it's made you kind of carry yourself a little bit differently. Do you know what I mean? Am I totally missing the mark on this?
I'm just looser behind the camera.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing I learned. Be more loose, not so rigid.
And I think that's where I was going with it.
But
I just think it's made you more comfortable.
Oh, yeah. It's not the articulation of the words I still struggle with. I know that. And on my brain, when you're on a camera, things go like this in your head and then like this in your head, right? And when they stop, that's what comes out. And you're like, did that come out right? And then on the other side, as this one's still going.
And some of the questions I would ask bands and whatnot, I kind of wish that I got, like, not saying a better answer, but I was like, man, I really wish they got more in depth in that specific field.
Yeah.
There's a couple that I was asking you. I was like, man, I wish I got like a more in depth thing with that specific element in his career or whatnot, or
Yeah,
this, that, and the other. It happens, man. But when,
it
like you
does.
said, your mind is just racing and racing and racing.
Yeah.
And it happens as a host. I can tell you that much.
Oh yeah.
as we both have found out this. Now, what would you like to see change for the better on the show? Would you like to see more of the history lessons? Do you like the more obviously, and we'll do more of the 3-4 hour interviews. They're a bit tricky, but I always like the in-person interviews the
Mhm.
best. I just love talking because you get a connection that you can't really get over a webcam or whatnot. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So I would like to do some more in-person interviews.
Yeah. In person would be awesome, as well as I think those the band history lessons. I think those are still cool. I still love those. I think what we do when we do our top when we bring on the other guests and we do our top five, I think that's awesome. I think doing more shows with Sean and Brian. I think those would be more killer too, as because we had planned that already. Um,
I
to interview some more bands that okay. Like, is it okay if
You
I
can mention anything you
use a
want.
band as an example?
Sure.
So there's this band from New Jersey, man. They're one of my favorite bands ever. Like, and I don't know why I don't talk about them much. Probably because I just, they're there for me all the time, but they're not. I don't always think about them because they're there for me all the time. This band that they're called Vicious Circle. They're from New Jersey. They're like if you were to mix thrash and old 80s hardcore and death metal like in a blender, and they've been around for a while, but they're just so like underground, and I don't want to say forgotten because they're not forgotten, but they're just they've always been just outside that grasp of people, and this band is insane. And I would love to like find more of those kind of bands and see what interview those kind of bands or have those kind of people on the show. Like, okay, for example, what was the band that you did the tour with a while back?
Oh, Silent Scream. I've
Silent
done.
Scream, yes.
Okay.
So see that like that's another good example. Like they were around for a long time, but they were just outside that grasp.
Well, I have that interview. I haven't posted it, but I do have the interview I did
Yeah.
with Mario and whatnot, and I could post it.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I'm just
So
saying for future references.
sure, and I plan on getting Patrick, the drummer, on the show too. He wanted to come on, but they're working on like some new EP or something, and I'm trying to wait till that thing comes out, and then when it comes out, then I can kind of get the whole shebang,
Right, right,
right? Um, yeah, I love those kind of interviews too, man. Especially Death and Thrash. I just love Death and Thrash so much.
right.
Which is
Me
why I
too.
play in a death thrash band. And what I would like to see more of too is just the continuation of what we're doing. The continuation of just going out there and not giving a fuck and doing the best that we could do with promoting the bands that we'd like, and especially new bands, and getting an entire generation into that said band and whatnot. And having that vehicle to do it would be
Right.
huge, having an alternative to all the other, tabloid bullshit sites.
Mhm.
So it's important to me to do that, to have an alternative media, if I may
Yeah,
say so.
right.
So, um,
But I'd
now
I'd like to know what the fans have to say,
I
what the
would
people
too.
listening have to say. That would be interesting. What kind of bands would the people want to hear? What the interviews? What would do they like the top five? Do they like the top 10? Some podcasts I find that they're good. Other times I don't find them pleasant at all because I could give a fuck. But it just depends. It's a hit and miss thing. The top tens, top fives. But that's my opinion. I don't
Me,
always like listening, but
well, you see, here's the thing. What I'm going to say with this, I don't try and cater to the majority, right? Because
Mhm.
I think that everybody, all the other media platforms, kind of just do that, which is why you see the same bands being interviewed over and over
Yeah.
again. I'm trying to cater to the minority to do something different and then build that up into the majority. Does that make sense? It's a
Yeah, yeah,
tougher
yeah.
road to do,
Right.
but it's grassroots level, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have
Yeah.
no interest in interviewing, and I don't even want to mention any big name bands, but you know the bands I'm talking about. And what
Mhm.
I would like to start doing on this particular show is not even mentioning those said bands,
Mhm.
only mentioning fucking Madrost and Fuel by Fire and Adventure of Blood and Warbringers and Malignant Altars. You know
Mhm.
those kind of bands, the bands that are
Mhm.
still that are here doing it still that never sold 2 million, 3 million albums,
Mhm.
right? Those bands are done.
Mhm.
So let's concentrate on now and never even mention these big name bands. Not even keep
Mhm.
them in the conversation anymore. Just focus on new music.
Yeah.
Do you think that could be done?
That could be done easily. Could be done easily. Hell yeah.
And the other thing that I would like to start doing more and more of, and you mentioned the Angelo thing, I always liked having a different alternative to that said band. Instead of interviewing them about that band, having something fun on what their opinion is of their own band. I just find
Mm.
that stuff fascinating too,
Yeah, yeah,
getting
yeah.
Angelo to come on and doing a top 10 song of Heretic of his own band. Like that was really cool to
Yeah, it
do.
was. Yeah.
Thinking
Do
outside the
that some
box
more.
that way, and it's you bet your bottom dollar it's gonna keep happening like that. So
Yeah.
don't fret if those are your favorite episodes. Everyone who's tuning in currently, I would like you guys to kind of reach out to us and give us your opinion of what you would like to see more of on the show and just what you enjoy most about this particular show. And I got to mention this too. The whole CMSPN platform is amazing. I got to give a huge shout out to kind of everything that's gone right with 2021. You know, the show got on the platform. It's kind of like the show got signed. and
Yeah, yeah.
and it's kind of like the indie label kind of thing. And obviously with No Lifetime Metal Records with Madras, that always should get a shout out with Scott and Bill and whatnot. But I've pertaining to the CMSPN, they've given us a huge boost in an audience and finding a whole new audience that can appreciate this thing more, right? Because most of the shows and whatnot, they talk about the old school bands, which God bless them, that's what their show is about. But I like the fact that they've, and especially Chris Aiken, he's found an immense fascination and support for this show to do more of the extreme metal bands because that's who doesn't really get a lot of either accolades or promotion or I that's one area that I would like to concentrate, but I also don't want to pigeonhole the show into only doing extreme metal bands.
Hmm.
That's the balance, which is why I just do what I want,
Right. Right.
right? So,
It
but
works out in
Shannon,
the end.
um, give us uh, give us your final thoughts on 2021 this year, and especially with everything that's gone on with Poppitt's Corner.
21 has been a year of ups and downs as every year. Uh, Nothing you can do to fix the bad or the good, so just keep rolling with it. As far as the show, same thing. It's got its ups and downs, it's got its positive negatives, but you can't fix what's not broken, so we're just going to keep doing what we do.
Absolutely, my man. Of course, we enjoy each other's company, so there's nothing more that needs to be said other than that. But guys, that's going to do it for us here on Poppitt's Corner. Shannon Fry, the great Shannon Fry, is and myself are looking forward to doing this more and more and more. So, but for another episode of Poppitt's Corner, guys, we're out of here. Cheers.